know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Justin here. Just letting you know that there's not a regular episode this week. It is the week of Thanksgiving. So instead, we're going to give you a little bit of a Patreon preview. This is a taste of the type of bonus audio that you get over at patreon.com/punklautopod. For $1, you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. Dylan and I always record something, except for like weeks like this. It's during a holiday and things are a little busy. We release content such as our chart dives, where we discuss the albums that were released in a year, or we take a look at the modern rock charts or the Hot 100 charts for a corresponding year for that week's episode. We do I'm Listenings, where we talk about the music we listened to over the previous month. We have our News of the World, where we discuss the news stories over the last month. We have Master Punk Theater, where we talk about films, and our Bracketologies, where we pit albums or artists in head-to-head competition. You also get some solo content from me, such as our new release update audio, where I discuss the albums that came out that week that I think you should check out, or some of the other solo ideas that I have started, and this is one of them. Challenge-ography was a show that Dylan and I had originally done, where we tried to get through an artist's discography before the other person, or deeper into the discography than the other person. So we did it a couple of times with the bands Firehose and the Muffs, and then we started with Hot Water Music, but then we eventually just gave up on it. It was kind of tough to try and like correspond each other's like listening habits, and it was a little tough. So I reworked the format as a solo show. Instead of a competition where I'm trying to get through an album before Dylan, instead this is more of my version of Bandsplain, or One Band 5 Songs, where I go through an artist's entire discography. And I started off with the band Pinback, a band I knew little to nothing about that I have since become a very big fan of since starting the series. So the idea of the series is that I go through the band's discography and listen to all of their major key releases. So that's all their LPs, all their big EPs or major compilations. I don't do every single like individual single or B-side just because that'd be a lot to track down, but all the key releases from the band Pinback. And this is part one of that series, where I discuss the very first Pinback album, as well as the EPs that followed it, leading up to their second LP. I really enjoyed doing this. I'm finding so much about the band that I really enjoyed. So like, this is definitely a series that I plan to continue in the future, just focused on different artists. Currently, on the Patreon, there's parts 1 and parts 2 of the Pinback series. Part 3 will be up soon, and I do plan on doing a part 4 and 5, but those won't be nearly as long because there's not as many releases during those. So yeah, I'm really enjoying this series, and I thought I would share it with you, and hopefully you like it too. And if you want to hear the rest of the series, head over to the Patreon, patreon.com/punklautopod. $1. That gives you so much audio. We have over 200 posts over there, audio and video posts over there, so you definitely get your bang for your buck. And if you're really interested, check out that $10 tier, where you do a one-time donation and you choose the album we devote an entire episode to. So put your money where your mouth is. Check it out. I hope you all find some fun stuff over there that you like. And yeah, I hope you all have a great Thanksgiving, and we just appreciate you for listening. So thank you all so much. We'll be back next week with an episode on REM's Life's Rich Pageant. So be on the lookout for that. Thank you all so much, and we'll talk to you later. What's up, posers? Welcome to the new and improved Challenge-ography. I'm your host, Justin Hensley. You know this. You're a patron. You guys know who I am. And you may remember the series that we had called Challenge-ography. This is a little Patreon bonus audio series that Dylan and I did, where we tried to get through an artist's entire discography, but we kind of made it too complicated. Like, we had like a scoring system to it, and the idea was for like one of us to like see who could get done the fastest or listen to the most of a discography. And we were like assigning like points for like an album versus an EP versus a single, like all that. We over convoluted Challenge-ography to a degree that it just got hard to do. And also it's hard to like have two people try and go through an entire discography in like a timely manner. So the last one we did was like a Hot Water Music one, and we got like halfway through their discography, and Dylan was like an album ahead of me. And so I think we were just like, Dylan won. He did more than I did on that run. We probably could have finished it, but it just didn't happen. So when we've got a regular weekly show to prepare for, having a long-standing project where you're having to listen to an entire discography in like a time frame makes it a little tough. So at least with two people. So yeah, this new version of the show, it's going to be a little simpler. So it's just me doing this. Dylan has talked about doing Challenge-ography maybe on TikTok or something like that. So if he ever winds up doing that, I'll start sharing those on the Patreon. In fact, he started doing some I'm Listenings on TikTok that are pretty fun. He does like these little slides of like what album he listened to, a couple albums he listened to that week, and then like writes about them a little bit. So it's kind of a fun idea. We'll see if he keeps doing that. But in the meantime, I decided I wanted to do this. And instead of doing like the point system and trying to compete with each other, I'm just going to go through an entire artist discography. So really think about this as my version of like Bandsplain, or even One Band, 5 Songs, our show hosted by our wonderful friend Dave Brown. His show is more got specific like rules. Like he's picking like 5 songs from an album's entire discography, and he talks about most of the discography of these artists, but his gimmick is more song specific. And so with this version of Challenge-ography, the goal is to get through an artist's entire discography. So some artists I already know a lot of albums, and the type of bands I want to choose for the show, or at least are going to be bands that I have not heard everything they've put out. So the idea is that I'm going to pick a band that I've heard no more than half of their discography. So if like a band has like 7 albums and I've heard 4 of them, they won't qualify. I won't do them. But if an artist has like 5 records and I've heard 1, they're on the table. They're available for the topic. So I'm also going to focus primarily on key releases by an artist. So I'm going to do albums, EPs, and any like live album or compilation that had a pretty wide release. I'm not really going to hunt down like singles or B-sides unless it's very, very important that I do, or they don't have that many to begin with. So, but it'll make more sense, especially when we start talking about the artist today. But just because like singles are hard to find, and a lot of times it's just like one song, and then what am I going to say about just like that one song? So bigger releases, more key releases. And if it's a single and I talk about it, it's because it's like the only place that single appears or something like that. So that'll depend on artist to artist, of course. And I tried to decide if I wanted to do like the Bandsplain style and just do the entire discography in like one chunk, like the marathon recording sessions that Yasi does with her guests. And I didn't really want to do that. I could, but it would take me a while to get through the entire discography, and that would actually cause like bigger gaps between episodes, especially like bigger gaps between like artists. So if like I finish the first artist and move on to the second artist, it could be months between episodes if I do it that way, because I don't have the time that Yasi does. That's her only podcast. So, or well, she's got the other one, but whatever. That's our main podcast, and I still got our main show and our weekly bonus audio and the new release updates, so I didn't want to do that. So instead, I'm going to talk about an artist in chunks. This most likely will be, again, changed based on the artist that I'm talking about, but most likely will be just like an LP and the EPs and like side releases surrounding an LP. And like I said, this one will make sense whenever I really get into it. So that way it's going to be a multi-part series, but it won't be like a different piece of audio for every single thing they put out. So yeah, this is an experiment. We're going to try this out. We're going to see how this goes. First episode, of course, like always, we'll learn and grow and change and do things slightly different as the show progresses. So let's get into Challenge-ography. And the first artist that I selected is the band Pinback. And for our first installment, we'll be talking about the first LP and the following 3 EPs that came out after the LP. So that gives you an idea of how this is going to work. But I guess let's start with why I chose Pinback. So they are a band that I knew absolutely nothing about. They're a band that I knew the name. I'd know their album covers. I'd maybe heard an album, but like it was so long ago that like I don't even remember. And when Rob Crow, one of the singers in Pinback, started his new band with John Reese of Rocket from the Crypt called Plosives, my initial reaction was, okay, I didn't know that's what his voice sounded like. I did not know Rob had such a high voice. And 2, what does Pinback sound like? And so they were kind of just this mystery to me. They're this band that I was like, people like them, they're well regarded, but they're not like a band that everyone talks about all the time. So I definitely was like, what's the deal with that band? I want to learn as much as I can about them. And the way I decided to talk about them was I listened to like their first 2 albums and I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, but then I was like, you know what? Let's do it. Let's go for it. Let's really dig in on this band. So yeah, that's kind of my history of Pinback. Not knowing shit about them other than their name and hearing Plosives before I ever heard Pinback. So Pinback are from San Diego, California. They formed in 1998 by 2 musicians, Armistead Burwell Smith IV, aka Zach. He goes by Zach a lot in press, so we'll be calling him Zach a lot. Maybe we'll see. Maybe I'll use Armistead interchangeably with Zach. Armistead. It's probably Armistead. I probably said that wrong the first time, but as well as Rob Crow. These are the only 2 constant members of this band throughout their entire discography. They have a rotating batch of just like different people they've used to play on records with and do live touring with. So Zach and Rob are our main focus here. Zach was previously involved in the band's Neighborhood Watch and 3 Mile Pilot. 3 Mile Pilot is actually kind of similar to Pinback's sound. I guess you would say they're probably more like a post-hardcore, post-punk band, indie rock band. I don't know. And they're interesting too. They have a decent-sized discography, but I didn't dig too much into them. And Rob has actually way more projects than I'm going to list here. He has so many projects that he was doing prior to and concurrent with Pinback. Plosives is the one that I was first introduced to, but there is one that I had no idea was connected to them. There's a metal band called Goblin Cock, and I remember seeing the CD for that band at Best Buy like 15 years ago. Like I was in teenager or like early college. Like, yeah, it was. I remember seeing that, and it has like a cartoonish album, grotesque album cover that was like censored by a label on at Best Buy. So very funny. I did not know that was the same guy here. Very funny. I should listen to them just to see what's up with that band, but definitely a tongue-in-cheek thing. So it is worth mentioning Rob's probably most well-known projects that he was involved with prior to Pinback were Thingy and Heavy Vegetable. Those probably had the most releases. So those are the things that Thingy especially was what he was really known for. And he has some solo stuff under his own name too, but like I said, so many other projects. And Pinback was originally intended to be just a side project, just this little thing to do on the side. Like Rob has a ton of bands that do that already, so like it makes sense. This is just going to be something to do. But then 3 Mile Pilot went on hiatus, and then Rob put a lot of his projects on hold specifically to focus on Pinback. Because I think they were like, we got something here. So the band's name is a reference to the 1974 film Dark Star, which I believe is a John Carpenter sci-fi comedy. A movie that I've never seen. I should watch it. It doesn't have a big cultural impact. It's very funny that it's not as super known, especially being a John Carpenter movie, but it's also a major influence on one of my absolute favorite TV series, which is the BBC sci-fi comedy Red Dwarf. Very inspired by Dark Star, partly inspired by The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, heavily inspired by original Star Trek and Star Trek Next Generation, as well as Twilight Zone and Outer Limits, and the Aliens was a big influence on them too, the design of the set. So Red Dwarf, hilarious show. I'm working through that show currently on Tubi, entire series on Tubi, all 12 seasons. It It's British, so each season's only 6 episodes long, so it wouldn't actually take you that long. I'm going to rewatch them up to season 8. I love this show. It's my comfort show. But anyway, that's not what we're here to talk about. But yeah, some Dark Star clips wind up appearing in some of their music here. So there's one that I know of that I'll point out when I get to it, but because it's pretty obvious. But yeah, I don't know about the rest of them because I don't know that movie well enough. And let's just start with the very first thing that Pinback released of note. And that is the self-titled album Pinback by Pinback. This is their debut full-length, originally released in the US on Ace Foo Records on October 12th, 1999, and it was released in Europe later that year on Cutty Shark Records. The European version goes under the name This Is a Pinback CD and features a slightly altered track listing with 2 additional songs. This is also the version of the album that is available on Spotify. So this is the one I'll be talking about primarily. The only difference is they added 2 songs to the album and then rearranged, I believe, 2 songs too. 2 of the original songs. So it's not a major change, and that's why I was fine with just doing this version because it was released the same year. It's not like it was 4 years later and they reorganized it or something like that. But the album was produced by Zach, and for this album, Zach performs vocals, bass, keys, guitar, and drum programming. And Rob performs vocals, guitar, bass, drum programming, not two separate instruments. Keys, percussion, timpani, scratches, as in DJ scratches, and cello. And joining them on this record on drums is Zach's 3 Mile Pilot bandmate, Tom Zinzer, and he performs on 2 songs on here, Rousseau and Montaigne, kind of a French word, I believe. And immediately you're like, wow, these 2 dudes play a lot of instruments. And they do. They play so many instruments. It's so wild how talented they are as musicians. Because I've seen some live footage and like sometimes they'll be playing guitar, sometimes they'll be playing bass, and like sometimes they'll both be playing bass. And it's very fun to watch them choose which instrument to play. I mean, it's really cool that they are so multi-talented. And it by only having like the 2 songs with a drummer on it on this album, it shows you that they are like multi-instrumentalists kind of just wanting to do everything by themselves, which they invite other people in later. But yeah, it's so cool that they can do all of this stuff. So the album was recorded at Zach's home computer, and by August of 1998, they had recorded 14 songs. This album was recorded entirely on a home computer in 1998. Imagine that. Now, I imagine he probably had a pretty good computer, but it sounds so good. Like, I'm shocked at how good it sounds. Like, all these years later, like, I hear this album and I don't go, oh, yeah, that's got that, 90s production, or or like, oh, it's got that weird compression that like CDs had during the like 2000s that they hadn't quite figured out. Like digital recording sounded kind of weird back then, but no, this was recorded on a computer. I'm sure it was some nice computer and not like a crappy like Gateway like I used in 1998. But yeah, really, really cool. Really ahead of the curve when it comes to like home recording, because most home recording at this time was still like, 8-track, 16-track home recorders. Like people didn't have that kind of stuff. So really impressive that this record was recorded entirely digitally that early on. So originally this album was going to be released on a local label called Vinyl Communications, but after a performance at the North by Northwest Music Festival, a major bidding war began for this record. So what wound up happening was it went on hold. My guess is they played this thing, and then people came up to them like, hey, I run a label, you should put your record on our label. And they were like, well, we already have a label we're going to be working with, but these other labels were like, we can get you better distribution. And so it was like, okay, yeah, we'll work with you. But it took a year to actually come out. And so one of the things going into this, I was like, what is Pinback supposed to sound like? My brain thought Pinback sounded like Pavement, or maybe even Archers of Loaf, or maybe even Seam. Like I was thinking more of closer to a Merge record sound. And instead what I get is a very, very different record. And so when I talked to Dylan about this, and I was telling him my idea for Challenge-ography, and I told him, I was like, think about doing Pinback. But one of the questions I asked is, do all their songs sound like that? And if you've heard this album, you know what I mean. And Dylan's response was, yes, they do. And what I mean by that is every song is playing, it's a very unique sound. What I think of when I hear this record is like something along the lines of maybe like a slower Modest Mouse. Like take those like quieter Modest Mouse songs that are slightly kind of like plinky and playing along with like, they're not playing like full chords and stuff like that. Or somebody like a Slint, like a way less mathy Slint, a little slower. There's an emo element to their music, and I did see quite a few people online, especially on TikTok with like younger listeners, who call them like a Midwestern emo band. And I don't agree that they're with that terminology, because one, they're not from the Midwest, so and they're not doing Mineral, they're not doing Braid, they're not doing American Football, but what they're doing does share some similarities between American Football. So honestly, it feels maybe the middle ground is somewhere between Modest Mouse and American Football. It's probably like the best comparison for like the sound. But really when I think about it, it's just Pinback sound. It sounds like Pinback. And Rob vocally has a very high emo style voice. So I think that's why some emo fans like to call them an emo band. I get it. They're not an emo band. They're not a math rock band, but they do emo and math rock things in their music. Ultimately, they're still, to me, just an indie rock band. The number one thing you notice while listening to this album is the guitar work. Almost none of the guitars on this record, or bass, because they alternate between playing bass and guitar on the album, is very little strumming. It's not so much strummed music. Instead, it's mostly plucked. And I watched some videos of Zach playing bass, and he doesn't play with a pick. He plays with his hands. There's some slap elements. There's definitely some finger picking going on. There are chords, like he's making a chord and then like pulling some of the strings, but it's definitely not power chords. They're not just like strumming along on this record. Almost every song is like picked in some way. So by doing this like picking style of playing guitar and bass, you get this very percussive feel to the record. And while most of the record is just drum programming and like 2 songs with actual drums on them, they do this really neat thing where it's almost like the drum beats and the bass and guitar picking are on opposite beats. So it's like they're on the off beat that the guitar and bass are picked. It's very interesting. It gives this, like I said, a very percussive feel to the sound of this record. There's another band called Battles. They're like an instrumental math rock band. I think it's like some former Don Caballero people, which Don Caballero would be a good comparison too. But like there's like this like, it is mathy in a way. Like you're timing your drumming and programming with the between notes of the guitar and bass. So it's really unique sounding. Like, I've not heard much that really does sound like this, especially that doesn't like turn into math rock. And so the band has two singers, Zach and Rob, both do all the singing on here, and that adds another kind of like intertwining feel. They have very similar voices. They both have like kind of higher voices. I don't know who to exactly compare them to. I've never actually been able to 100% figure out who they sound like, but they are roughly similar vocally, so it's kind of hard to tell who's singing what, which is, it's fine. Their voices work really well together, but there'll be songs where they're trading off vocals, and like I didn't know it until I saw live footage where I was like, oh shit, there's two people singing this. Very, very interesting. There are a variety of keys and synths on this record. They add a lot of different textures to the album. There are some fun samples, a lot of electronic drum beats on here. Like, the record feels a little bit like a magic trick to me. It's like everything has to be timed perfectly to sound clear. It avoids becoming like this big mess. Like, everything works just perfectly together. And so the album opens up with the track Tripoli. It has a great hook on the chorus, and then you get to like the DJ scratching on this track. I was taken aback. I was like, what is this band? Like, it gives them a trip hoppy feel to them, even though there's not that much. I don't think you really hear DJ scratching on the rest of the record. It was just very like, what am I listening to? Well, the first time I heard that, I was like, whoa, that's insane. What is that? And then the second track, Hurley, opens up with a sample of George Hurley of the Minutemen's drum from the song It's Expected I'm Gone, which is just this, like, I heard it the first time and I was like, holy shit, I know that drum beat. And it's directly sampled from the Minutemen song. So fun. Here, I'll let you hear it. Great. It's so good. I love it. The song's Charborg and Chaos Engine's use of electronic drum beats really reminds me of the band Arab Strap, which is another like two-man project where they have like people perform with them live, but it's just the two of them in Arab Strap, and they used a drum machine on a lot of their early records, and very similar feel to these two songs on this record. But there's also like a really fun organ sound on Chaos Engine, and then that song also like picks up with like a double kick at the end. Really cool. There's a song on here called Shag that has some really fun percussion that is also sampled from the Shags song, Shag's Own Thing. So I'll play that here too.
Okay, girl, now let's see what you can do. Oh, baby, I feel it now.
It's really cool how they're using these like elements of other artists in the past and then just like borrowing them and incorporating them into their own sound. There are a lot of really standout songs on this record. One of my favorites on here is Loro. Loro is similar to Tripoli for me in that it's like a chill song. Loro is really good, really fun, really engaging song that is kind of mellow, kind of laid back. And it was very funny. I was looking up, there's like a fan-made YouTube video of Loro, and one of the comments, well, the first comment I read was one of the saddest things I'd ever read. Very sad. But Loro is apparently for a lot of people just a song that they use to calm themselves down. There's one person who said, whenever I have some like, when I was at school, whenever I had a test, or like whenever I was at work and I had a big like presentation type thing or interview, I would listen to this song beforehand and it would chill me out. And I could see how this song could be super beneficial to you. Last night, I listened to the album again, just kind of as a refresher, because I was going to try and record this today. And I listened to the song, and I actually had a pretty rough day yesterday. It was definitely not a lot of sleep involved, an emergency vet visit thrown in there, and just like slept later and then didn't go to work because my sleep is all fucked up. Anyway, you're not here for that. But listening to that song that late at night, I was like, this is nice. This is calming. This is exactly the kind of thing I need to hear right now. So, Loro, that's a 5-star song for me. This song is incredible. I love it. I'm probably going to be listening to this in like repeats in the future. And I'm not even like a single song repeat kind of guy. So that's got to tell you something. There's another really killer song on here called Crutch. It has a really fun rock energy to it. It's got a really huge bass sound. Like, there are so many good songs on this album. I was amazed at how good some of these songs are. The only real drawback I feel like this album has is it's 50 minutes long. It's a pretty long album. I mean, this is the extended version with 2 new songs on it, but the original version's still like 40-something minutes, and the songs themselves are similar in the same vein that, like, there's a little sameness, especially when you get towards the end of the album. And like, I'm not complaining about any of the songs on here. There's no song on this record that I outright disliked. I do think that it could have been fine as the shorter version. I don't think we needed the extended version. But like I said, there's like 5 or 6 songs on here that I'm like, star that, heart that, whatever you call it, liked songs on Spotify, whatever that is. There's a lot that I added to a list last night. And so I was just like, this record is really good. And these songs like hit in a way that are so special. So for this record, the songs Tripoli and Loro were each released as singles. Tripoli was on a 7-inch with a remix of Hurley called Hurtley. It's called like the wedding remix too, as well as some more remixes of Tripoli and Hurley on the maxi single CD version. And that came out on Cutty Shark. And then Loro was released on a 7-inch with Clemenceau, which is a song... Clemenceau. I don't know. They use a lot of French words, so I don't know how to pronounce some of this stuff. But that song's not on this record. It's a B-side. I believe we will hear that later. That came in on Ace Fou as a 7-inch, and then on CD, Clemenceau and Avignon released as a maxi CD on Cutty Shark. The initial reaction to the album was positive. Pitchfork gave it a 7.2 at the time, which actually, if you think about 90s Pitchfork, that's pretty good. The review was positive. It was not snarky, really at all. So kudos for them. And following this album release, the band toured the West Coast as well as Europe. They were featured on NPR's All Things Considered. And this CD actually became an in-store play for Urban Outfitters. And they were the featured band on Napster at the peak of Napster's like controversy. Originally released only on CD, it was pressed on vinyl for Record Store Day in 2014, and it's out of print. I'm pretty sure it's out of print. I didn't double check, but a lot of their stuff's out of print and hard to get. They have a very dedicated fan base that buys their stuff, but I guess like there's small print runs on a lot of that stuff too. And that is the end of our first LP, but we got a couple EPs to check out next. So we're going to move on to Live in Donny's Garage.
I spent a lifetime knocking around the same patch of concrete. I wasted my time breaking rocks and painting smiles on my feet.
Now, this was self-released in August of 2000 to coincide with their tour of Europe, and this is the beginning of a long-running tradition of the tour EP from Pinback. Who is Donny? Good question. Donny is Donny Van Zant, who performs bass, keys, and percussion on this EP. He also toured with the band as their keyboard player around this time. So on this release, Zach sings and plays bass and keys, Rob sings and plays guitar and bass, and then Tom Zinzer is back to play drums. So right off the bat, first thing I immediately noticed is how different these songs sounded compared to the album. Naturally, when you are a studio band and you're doing all the instruments yourself, when you have to translate those to a live setting, it's going to sound different. One, you can't pull off nearly as many of the tricks that you had, like do-overs or comping in tracks and multiple takes. And so you're playing it live essentially. You're playing it live, not just essentially, but literally. You are also playing with other musicians, so they're not playing the songs the exact same way that you played them. It's how you taught them to play it, but, it's not exactly the same. Everybody plays slightly different from each other. But what's really cool is the energy changes. So with the album, it's very it's slower. It's a slower album, surprisingly. But when they translate them to a live setting, the songs get faster, and so they're not nearly as precise as the album version, but they're faster and they have a little bit more energy to them. And that actually kind of makes sense with what they do, which songs they chose to do for this release. This live EP is a performance that features Avignon, Shag, Crutch, Tripoli, Hurley, Rousseau, and This Train. So it starts off the song Avignon, which is a B-side, and then Shag is on here. It's performed in a much more upbeat and fun way. It's a fun, upbeat song on the album, and so it's probably perfect for a live setting too. And it kind of reminded me of a B-52's jam. I don't know how to describe that. It has a little bounce to it, a little rhythm to it that just reminded me of them. Tripoli's on here, and it features some scratches on it, which, listening to it, I was like, I don't think this is a DJ setup. I think this is him scratching on his bass strings. It's like he's doing a pick scrape on the bass string to make the scratching noise. It works. It does in a pinch, and if you don't want to have a full DJ setting on the side, it makes sense to have just him do it on the bass. This Train is on here as well, and it only shows up again on another tour CD later, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And it's a more piano forward tune. And so this EP was originally only pressed on CDR. The band did eventually re-release it as a little bit more professional CD. But yeah, the translation from studio band to live band is almost a completely different creature. And it's really cool to hear these songs performed live, which makes sense because they eventually turn into a little bit of a live band. They're known for their live shows. They're known for their sets. And there are lots and lots and lots of bootlegs of their live sets, which I discovered. Especially if you look at the Rate Your Music page, it has 10 or 15 different live recordings listed in there. Very interesting. None official. This is the only official live thing, I think. There might be something else later, like an EP or another EP later, but no full-length live albums. So they have a little bit of a tape trader energy to them. So which back then is more just CDRs and downloads and MP3s, but very cool to hear these songs live. All right, let's move on to our next release, and that is Some Voices.
Hyperdrive sequence begun. Hit it, Pinback.
Some Voices is a 4-song EP, and it was released September 5th, 2000 on Cuddy Shark Records, on CD, as well as 10-inch vinyl in Europe, and Tree Records on CD in the US. So all 4 of these songs are brand new. This is all new material. For this record, Zach is singing, playing bass, guitar, piano, accordion, cello, and drum programming, and Rob is singing, playing piano, guitar, bass, cymbals, as well as more drum programming. And we also have Tom Zinzer back again playing drums on the songs Manchuria and June. So yeah, we have the live EP between this EP and the first album. And one thing I immediately picked up on was, oh, their sound is changing already. They're evolving their sound from less of a studio-y, precision, perfect thing to something that more resembles their live show. So while the music is still very intricate, because they had to then translate all those studio songs to a live setting, they probably had to figure out a way to play those songs so that they sound good and accurate. And that has to go into the mental capacity when you're writing the songs for your next release to be like, okay, we need to write something that we can play live and pull off. Because it was originally just like it was like a side project thing, being able to pull it off live wasn't necessarily like at the top of their list. Then the band took off and they're like, oh, okay, well, we got to figure out how to do this now. So it changes the way you write your songs. It changes the approach. Like there's still like multiple different people or multiple different instruments performed by the same two people primarily. But yeah, definitely just, it's a little less plinky than the self-titled. And the band will become more pop-centric over time, or a little bit more pop-friendly. They start incorporating more hooks and more... Though they are pretty hooky. There's a pop sensibility that they start to approach on later releases. And this is kind of a step in that same direction. Because this EP has a little bit more straight ahead songwriting. The title track starts off with a sample. I think this is the one that is specifically from Dark Star. Because he says Pinback. There's a character named Pinback in that movie. And it's got some electronic drumming. There's like a repeating synth line on this EP. It's probably I'm not going to say it's the best song on here, because I think that's the final two tracks on here, but there's something about it that feels like we put this first because this is the more representative song. There's some more acoustic stuff on the next track on here. Though personally, I enjoyed the song Trainer a little bit more. That's probably my favorite of these four songs. But Manchuria it's another, they're all pretty like straightforwardly constructed songs. They're not this super like heady sounding stuff, but they're really well done. But yeah, different approach for sure. There is a weird thing about this 10-inch version of the album. So on one side, you're supposed to play it at the 45 RPMs, and then on the other side, you have to play it at 33 RPMs. And I find that absolutely hilarious because that means if you didn't change it, like you set it on the 45 setting for the A side, but then you didn't change it to the 33 on the B side, that means the songs are going to be a lot faster. I wonder if there's a chipmunky quality to it. You'd be like, that sounds weird when they started singing. I've done that before where I have like EPs or 7 inches or something. I think I even have like an LP that does the same thing. It's like 45 on one side and 33 on the other. But like it starts with the 33 side and then you flip it. And I didn't know that at the time, and I just put it on and let the B side, and it was on the 33 speed, and it was just like, like the slow motion. I was like, what in the world? And then it took me a minute to realize, like, oh, weird. Each side is a different speed. I'm assuming that's just because they couldn't fit. They want to do 2 songs on one side, 2 songs on the other. They probably wanted the 45 speed on both, but the backside was a little longer. So they're like, okay, let's just change that to a 33. It's very funny, but yeah, doesn't happen often. Also, 10 inches are a waste. Literally, what they do is they make a 12-inch record and then they cut off those 2 inches. It's literally waste. So keep that in mind if you ever buy a 10-inch. They're not that popular anymore. You don't really see 10 inches like you used to. I had one. It was like a Mighty Mighty Boss Tones, like double 10-inch. And it was just like, why is this way? Why don't you just do it on an LP? My guess is it means that the album was too long for like a single LP, and then it would have had like a blank side, or I don't know, do all 4 sides of 45. I don't know. There's a way to do that. But yeah, bands don't really do the 10-inch anymore. They're just kind of wasteful. And producing vinyl does pollute. So keep that in mind. It's a physical medium and you're producing physical products using chemical products, so like it creates some pollution. So I'm sure they reuse that as like some junk wax later, but yeah, my defense of vinyl, I don't know, I'm getting this weird environmental bent, but my defense of vinyl being like a way to collect music and like kind of offsetting the pollution is that most people who buy vinyl keep vinyl forever. People aren't really throwing away vinyl. So I know there is 100% vinyl in the landfills. I know that. But like, it's not a disposable thing. It's not something that you're supposed to like listen to once and throw away. So I'm fine with vinyl being produced. Just defending my hobby, I guess. But Pitchfork gave this EP a 7.1, little lower than the LP, but still pretty positive for them. Really only 0.1 lower. So, solidly received. Was later reissued on 2002 on Absolutely Kosher Records. And then this EP would be collected on another release later called Some Off-Cell Voices. So that's a collection of 2 EPs as one single album. So we probably won't talk about that one, but I'll mention that it came out whenever we get to it. And our final release for this week is going to be This Is a Pinback Tour EP. So yes, we are again discussing a tour EP. This is the second Pinback tour EP, self-released in August of 2001. I normally would not cover just a 2-song EP. It's not an EP, it's a single. Whatever, guys. But they're selling it as a CD, so it's funny. It's a single is what it really is, but it is funny to be like, it's an EP. It's like, it's because you pressed it on CD instead of a 7-inch, but... it is only 2 songs, but the only reason why I'm including this here is that these 2 songs do not appear in studio recordings again. So this is the only place that these 2 songs exist. So it is the song Serg and the songs This Train. Now, This Train was previously on the live EP, Live in Donny's Garage. So it's this fun thing where you heard the live version before you heard the studio version. Kind of neat. You don't really hear that very often. Serg very much feels like just something extra, something they had around. Clearly they don't include this on the next LP, so I guess they didn't think it was good enough to be on the record. They didn't, that's interesting. I wonder if there is like a version that they recorded during the studio session at that time, but they just didn't put it out. But yeah, it's a good song. It's very much in line with the album, the LP, but just like not quite as strong or as memorable. It's solid, but This Train is much better. I think This Train's a better song. But like I said, we'd already heard the live version, so it's kind of fun. It's fun to hear like the studio version, but they didn't change too much from the live to the studio. So, yeah, it's a solid song. I think This Train's better than Serg is, but I kind of get why these songs don't really show up again later. They have a lot of singles that never get, or not so much singles, but B-sides that never get collected. There is a compilation that they release much later in the future. And I'll talk about that when I get to it, because it's a lot of stuff that is B-sides and like from records and singles. So they have a lot of stuff that never got collected though on a compilation. Now that's not to say they're still an active band today. So there's always a possibility they just do another collection in the future and like collect all the rest of the other stuff. But yeah, interesting that they have a lot of singles that don't get collected. So, but yeah, I think that will do it for our first part of our Pinback series here. Love to hear your feedback. I really would love to hear from you. Let me know what you think of this format. I ran it past a couple people just to see what they thought, and I think everyone was like, yeah, do it in pieces. I was like, okay, I think that's what I'm going to do. Doing it in pieces, too, also means that there's not going to be as big of a gap between episodes. It means that I'm going to be able to get to those other releases faster. And I guess, okay, for our next part of the series, we will be talking about Blue Screen Life, which was their second full-length album. And then we're going to hit a couple other EPs that followed after that. We have More or Less Live in a few different places, Off Cell, and Arrive Having Eaten. So we'll probably talk about those 3. next time, and if I find something else that corresponds with this time frame. But yeah, Blue Screen Life is our next album, so looking forward to getting into that. I have heard the album already, but I need to re-listen and make notes this time. But yeah. So that one will be when I get it done. I it's no guarantee how soon I'm going to get that one. I'll try to get it done as soon as I possibly can. But hopefully this will motivate me to keep this going. And going past that, it looks like we're going to do an album and EP and like 2 EPs for each full length going forward. So yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about these future albums and seeing how much I enjoy the band Pinback by the time I'm done. So. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. Like I said, please give any feedback that you can. I want to hear your thoughts on this series and recommendations. I'm taking ideas for artists for me to cover in the future too. I think I know who I'm going to do my next artist on, but I got to get through Pinback first. So we'll do that first before we talk about other artists. But yeah, thank you all so much. Maybe I'll do like a special where I do all the side projects, just like not as in depth. We'll see. Getting ahead of myself. So thank you all so much for listening, and I will talk to you later.